Welcome to the Act Out Podcast. I'm your host, Adam Tomlin. Today's candidate is former candidate for the United States Senate for the state of Massachusetts, Alex Rikleen. Alex, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me. Glad to be here. Excited to talk.
Dude, it's my pleasure. As soon as you messaged me, Alex and I are actually in a kind of a big group chat with a lot of different progressive candidates and content creators. And so, Alex, whenever you message me, you're like, "Hey, I'd like to talk about these things." I was like, heck yeah, I want to talk to him."
Yeah, I think that I just want to make sure that chat is on silent right now because I have it on loud when I'm at home, and they get talkative during the day. Yep, no, it was not on silent.
This is like my first time being in a Signal chat. I had my my notifications on loud. Quickly turn those things off, man. It blows up, doesn't it?
Yep, and most of the time it's like fun, but also it's like three conversations simultaneously. It did get heated a couple nights ago, but most of the time it's like fun banter back and forth. Can you believe this is happening? Can you believe this separate, totally unrelated thing is happening?
Man, I think it's great though. Like I felt very like siloed. I live in Norfolk, Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's not a whole lot of like progressive content creators and progressive candidates. And then once I got like involved in the Signal chat, it felt like, oh man, I found home.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and it's similar as a candidate, one of the first things that we realized when I started this adventure is in many ways, this experience can be kind of isolating. Um, you, there's just not a lot like it, and it's all encompassing. It takes over your entire life. It takes over your family's life, and there's so much of it that's public. There's so much of it where you're interacting with other people, and you want to share the wins and you want to have a place to vent the losses. Um, but it feels it's a lot to put on your spouse or your significant other. It's a lot to put on your fantasy football friends. It's a lot to put on like these cohorts who want to be there for you and who want to support you, but don't have any backing in these areas. And it can be a lot. And so finding these communities, and for a lot of us candidates, we have at this point finally developed a couple of them. It's really a huge load, and in many ways I've heard the term lifesaver for a lot of these candidates, because just emotional health, mental health is tough when you're putting yourself out there so much, and having those outlets is important. And it's my wife was absolutely incredible throughout this entire process, but it's a lot to put it all on her, and having someone else who I can go talk to about stuff with was really helpful for me, helpful for her, helpful for everybody. And those people wanted to engage back. These candidates in California, in New Jersey, and wherever, they also wanted to talk about the Iowa and Alaska Senate races, and they also wanted to get into this nitty gritty. So it's been really great.
Now, have you always been interested in politics, or is this something that kind of like slowly happened over time?
So I've always been interested in politics. I've always been engaged, but the idea of me running for office is something that is less surprising the earlier you knew me. If you knew me in middle and high school and you found and hadn't heard from me in 15 years, and then you found out I was running for Senate, you were like, yeah, of course. But if you're someone who like actually spent the last 15 years with me, this felt more like a leap. I was the kid in high school who during current events or during civics, the teacher just handed it over to me. It was like, Alex, what's the latest on the presidential race? What's the latest on this? And I was in my moment. I loved that. But as much as I always followed it, I had really um tried to invest my energies differently and more locally, involved in the PTO at my kid's school, raised seeing eye dogs for service organizations. But I had directed my engagement away from the political sphere for the last decade, whereas it'd been the focus before that. I'd
Yeah.
deliberately chosen to direct it away um, until Trump won re-election and until I saw the Democratic reaction to that, and to me that was a sort of a reassessing point of like maybe I need to sort of go really full bore the other direction.
Man, that is so like as you're saying that, I was like, oh my god, like I saw so much of myself in that.
Mhm.
If listen, I'm trying to think. It was the 1994 gubernatorial election in Georgia. That was my very first experience with politics,
Yeah.
and I was one candidate, and my best friend was the other candidate. And our class had like a mock election, and there was something about that, man, where I just like the bug got me, and I was so interested in politics, growing up, so much so that I remember giving a speech to the class, and it was talking about what I wanted to, do whenever I grew up or whatever, and, I ended it with saying, "I'm not really for sure what's in store for me, but I do concur wholeheartedly with John F. Kennedy when he said, I think Hell to the Chief has a nice ring to it." Like,
um, yeah, I mean, I wrote an op-ed in high school. I think I was a sophomore in high school, and I got published in the second biggest paper in the state, um, about the inadequacies of the chair of the Democratic National Committee. Like that's the level of like of like dork that I was in. I was I was like, I need to vent my frustrations about the Democratic National Committee chair. Um
man, we would have been best friends.
yeah. So that's who I was sophomore of high school. I was I was very involved. I had uh, I have a mug. We still have it, of course, for Wesley Clark, who I don't know, what did he come in ninth in the 2004 presidential race? Like here, I'm still I'm by the when we bought that mug, I was probably a junior in high school, and here I am trying to convince my parents to buy a to support the no one else knew who he was at that point. I barely knew who he was at that point, but I, I had my theories of politics and theories of power and theories of how geography were in biography were going to shape that, and I thought that he was going to be a good candidate for that moment.
This is kind of up in your neck of the woods. I had a Dukakis Benson mug that I used for so long. That was like my prized possession.
So I was involved. I worked on exclusively losing campaigns for a long time. Um, um, we we joked that the first time I was on a winning campaign was when I was only volunteered for like 2 long weekends when I was already in my mid-20s. Um, that was the first time that I was a part of a campaign that actually won. Um, that was Catherine Clark, the current um, when she was first elected to Congress, when she was running for an open seat.
I've never lived in such a deep blue area where essentially the primary is the general election. You know, like whoever comes out of that primary is going to become the next either senator or representative of Massachusetts. So, can you kind of give the viewers like a little bit of how the statewide politics kind of plays out? Like, is it establishment versus kind of the progressive? Is that generally how it is, or is it just kind of like depends?
So, I mean, in some ways, every race is different, but there are definitely a lot of races where um, that happens. That was very the overarching dynamic is that most seats go unchallenged. There are actually a lot of challenges happening right now in the state, which I'm glad to see. But by a lot, I still mean half of the incumbent members of Congress are being challenged, and of those half, you know, just looking at the actions of I please do not take what I'm about to say as thinking that this is acceptable behavior on the part of the incumbents, but the incumbents are not treating the challengers as though they are uh, real threats to their position in many of those challenges. I think that is inappropriate. I think every incumbent should treat a challenger with respect. And every incumbent should respond, like have debates when there is a challenger. I think that that's how democracy functions. That's not happening. And I think that in the state Senate, where we have 35, 36 seats, I know the number, but I forgot it. We're in the middle of a conversation, so of course I forgot it. I think it's 35. I think it's 35. I think there are 2 open seats, so there are 33 incumbents running, and of those 33, maybe 4 or 5 are facing challenges. So very rarely is there anything other than the occasional open seat that gets contested.
Why do you think that is?
So I think that that's not just a Massachusetts problem. I think that happens in a lot of places. Um, and as you've seen from the chat, it's actually much worse in some places like Connecticut than it is here in Massachusetts. In places like Connecticut, they're being even more explicit about the ways in which they put the thumb on the scale. But
You're talking about the Democratic establishment putting.
yes, the Democratic establishment is being pretty overt there. I think in Massachusetts, what we're seeing is more soft pressure. You see a lot of people who say, "Look, if I challenge this incumbent, even if I think they're vulnerable, it is really a huge risk to my career that I don't have to take." And I'll make more friends with honey than vinegar, or whatever that phrase is. I think I just butchered it.
Well, yeah, but at the same time, you make even more with shit. So I don't know.
yeah, and no, but you're onto something. The Massachusetts state legislature as a whole
Mhm.
is really unpopular, and so these elected officials, they remain locally popular. They have their support base. They have job security because they're so popular locally. But they are a part of an institution that is very unpopular. And by the ways in which they are part of this soft power dynamic of never really pressuring, never really challenging incumbents, they are part of the sort of stagnation of the body. And they are part of this body that overall, it's all these small decisions along the way that add up to something where a shorter career in a more popular institution, and you might be celebrated longer. I don't know. Ask them. But it's I think that there's a lot of sort of soft power, soft influence that goes on in open seats. There is some of what you talked about initially. There is some of sort of establishment kind of picks a candidate. That doesn't happen every time. In the 2020, well, I guess it wasn't an open seat, but in the 2020 Senate race with Markey when he was challenged by Joe Kennedy, you didn't quite have the same like establishment firmly behind Markey dynamic. But in the gubernatorial race in 2022, that was an open seat. And the establishment kind of picked a candidate, even when it winnowed down to a very popular state senator and an attorney general, two elected officials with bases and good messages and good careers. Even at that point, you really had a lot of power and influence on one hand, and trying to pressure towards that candidate. As part of my prep for my campaign, and it was on, especially as you got later in the campaign, you almost scared. You put the idea that dynamic come out in the non-establishment choices commentary is really, you hear it in her tone, in not just her commentary, and in the way people are reacting to it. There was pressure from powers that be, and I don't know. I wasn't in those rooms, and I'm not going to be invited to them anytime soon, having challenged other at this time around. But so I don't know how much of it is explicit phone calls versus meetings are happening that you're not invited to, but the message gets sent that this is the candidate that we want to win. And I think that does happen in a lot of places.
So whenever you say kind of like the establishment kind of puts its thumb on the scale, so what they do is they help out with fundraising. Money opens up to the to their favored candidate, and then there's also a little bit of coordination where you kind of get like voter roll, or like, hey, like voter things and stuff, and helping out with polls. It becomes a very, very big advantage, right?
In Massachusetts, the party is good about at least facially remaining neutral. They don't explicitly do any of the fundraising or anything that is explicitly putting their explicitly advantaging one candidate over the other. I have a feeling that if I looked at the floor plan for those conventions and where they put the booth for their preferred candidate versus where they put the booth for their disfavored candidate, one would be near the entrance and one would be in the corner. I haven't seen the floor plan. And I guess one of those conventions was entirely remote, so they're off the hook for that one. So there may be some subtle things that they're doing, but in terms of at least explicit things, in Massachusetts, at least, they are good about remaining neutral. But when the message gets delivered that this is the candidate to support, that means more fundraisers happen for that candidate. So that candidate still gets access to more funding.
Mm-hmm.
but it's not direct. That is different. It is, you may say it's shady and you may have a fair point there, but that is different. That's what's happening in a lot of states. That is different than what's happening in some of the states where it's more explicit and shadier. What's happening in Connecticut is explicit rules violations.
Okay, what I haven't heard about this.
What happened in Connecticut is there is a procedure to get on the ballot where they hold a convention and you need 15% of votes to get on the ballot. And there is a procedure for how that convention is supposed to be run. And that procedure was not followed. Full stop. Here's call me. Who's the convention? Call me. What happened? They don't know what to say. As explicit as it be, what happened in Connecticut was the convention did not follow the rules it was supposed to. And in ways that, so in at least one case, District 3, Andrew Rice was 6 votes short of getting on the ballot. We have 2 people on the record saying that if the rules had been followed, they would have switched to him. So now he's 4 votes. Who knows how many other, we don't know if any of the other 200 or so people would have switched. But what incentive is there for them to come out now after a decision has been made and say, yeah, I would have switched also, especially while the state party just today, or yesterday, I guess the story about it came out today, rewarded the person who ran that convention who didn't follow those rules with leadership of this new prestigious committee. That is an explicit establishment putting their thumb on the scale in an objective way. That's happening in some states. That is different than what's happening in a lot. That more often you're getting the soft power, soft influence. The things that look and feel kind of corrupt, feels kind of yucky, but it's, I mean, it feels yucky because it's so much of it. But also it is very possible that just like in 2022, a lot of state senators, even though they worked with one, liked the attorney general better and they wanted to help it. That it may have been that there were calls going on behind the scenes where other influential people in the party were saying, we want you to do this, we want you to get behind this, and here's why we think this will help you. But they may have just liked her better. They may have had a grudge against the state senator because she didn't hold the door for him in the bathroom. I don't know. I love the state senator who lost. She was incredibly kind to me when I was an intern. I bet she held the door for him. But we don't even know. Like, it's one of those things where it feels yucky. And part of the reason it feels yucky is because it doesn't just happen in one race. It happens in multiple races over time.
Mm.
But everything that happened there is above board. What happened in Connecticut is not. And you do have instances of that. Much more of the states are like what's happening in Massachusetts, where it's above board, but it's people exerting influence on behalf of the establishment. They're exerting influence to try to preserve power. They're exerting influence to preserve status quo, usually. They're exerting influence to preserve moderation, usually.
So that brings up a really good point. Like you see the poll, or not even just polls. Like if you really like look on the ground and see the excitement of the voters and what the voters are asking for, they are wanting bold, progressive policies. It's pretty much a rejection of the status quo. So why is the establishment rewarding this status quo? It seems like it would be kind of political suicide, is it not? Asking you the hard ones.
It's because I think they just don't agree that that's what's happening.
Mm.
Um, I think they're wrong and you think they're wrong. Um, um, it is really hard to get someone to change their mind. And, you know, one of the themes of our conversation today is apparently me butchering colloquialisms. What's the
Hopefully it's me doing it. So
Yeah,
thank you
you're
for
correct.
making note.
I apparently needed to have coffee before this conversation. So what's the phrase of it's really hard to get someone to believe something when their salary depends on them believing the opposite. Um, the if your job depends on moderation and you built your name recognition on moderation and you built your career on, you know, I think we need to appeal to the center. If everything you've said and done and taught and advocated for years is based on that, and you've had all these conversations, and you know, we think this is obvious, but to them, it's not just that we're looking and saying, hey, this isn't working. Hey, you're not achieving what you say you want to achieve, and you're losing elections. Why do you keep trying this? They do have rationality to it. You know, they have their talking points that they say to themselves when they're at their dinner parties. You know, yes, every turnout vote is an extra vote for us, but every swing voter is 2 votes because it's one negative for them and one plus for us. Like they have their talking points that they are like, ah, yes, good point. Um, so it's not just it's not just that they have an idea that they're sticking to. They have arguments as well behind it. Um, and it's going to be really hard to get that cohort of people to back off. You know, these are so yeah. I mean, I look. I think that a lot of this has been clear even before you look at some of these primary wins. I think a lot of this was clear even before you look at Mamdani not only winning in the primary, but then also in the general. And when you look at just the swath of overperformance in special election after special election. To me, all of this was clear when you look at the deeper analysis going back to 2024. When you looked at the numbers out of 2024 that showed that Donald Trump won swing voters, Biden to Harris, or sorry, Biden to Trump versus Trump to Harris from, you know, when you look at the 2020 to 2024. Trump won swing voters by a margin of a couple 100,000. Trump won new turnout voters, people who didn't vote in 2020 versus people who did in 2024, by about 1 million. Those are margins, but those don't swing a national election on the scale that what we just saw. What swung the election in 2024 was the fact that in 2020, from 2020 to 2024, Democrats lost 19 million voters. 19 million voters stayed home. That is a much bigger margin than these swing voters and the new turnout voters who didn't vote before. We are losing our own support. And the lack of reflection on that point is, to me, what we should have been just laser focused on from jump.
Mhm.
But instead, there was a lot of focus on those first two numbers and the fact that Democrats did lose the swing voters and we did lose the new voters. But but the margins are just so different. And to give the apples to keep it apples to apples, Trump, because the all turnout was down in 2024. Trump lost about, I think it was 8 to 10 million. So a couple 100,000, a million versus a $9-ish million in terms of voters lost from 2020 to 24. That's the margin. That's where we lost.
It's so fascinating that you and I are having this discussion now. We're both on the same side, because if we were talking about this maybe 5 years ago, I would have been on the establishment side. It was very much in my mind, I was like, electability is the most important thing, and we've got to win elections. In order to win elections, you need to appeal to the middle. That was sort of how I saw things.
I got a Wesley Clark mug from 20 years ago. I was there too. We all go through it. But I to me, I keep thinking about how turnout isn't fixed. We spend so much time thinking about elections in the 100% mode, looking at it as 51-49, 52-48, etc. And we spend so little time thinking about the fact that that's not all of the voters. Trump has won 33.1, 33.2, and 33.4% of the vote in his 3 elections. Trump's support is flat amongst eligible voters in all 3 of his elections. What has changed is Democratic engagement and Democratic enthusiasm. Now, why was Joe Biden the guy that we got really bummed about? Hey, we can have that conversation another time. I think there's a lot to unpack there. I think there are some visible, obvious answers. There are some other answers that relate to the fact that Trump was an incumbent and we were sick of him. But I think we cannot overlook turnout, especially in a country where turnout's low.
Mm-hmm.
I think that if there are a lot of people who want to see somebody that's appealing to them, that's reaching out to them, that cares about them, that's engaging with them, and they don't feel like we've been in it.
That kind of brings me to the question I probably should have asked you about 33 minutes ago. Why don't you jump into the sentence?
Yeah, no, it's fine. Oh, we're done.
Damn, this budding friendship, man. You made it professional.
Okay. I got in because I felt that Democrats in Washington, I will go there. I felt like the organizing we needed was happening. The people with large audiences were calling on Democrats to do more, but Democrats in Washington had more available to them that they were choosing not to do. They were making the deliberate choice to hold back, leave some tools available, because they would rather things get worse and use that as campaign fodder against Trump and Republicans down the line than do everything they can to mitigate harm now. And I thought that was immoral. And I also thought that was bad strategically. Yeah. I think that when you show backbone, when you do everything you can to fight back, you are showing everybody that you can be trusted to fight back. And that there is nothing more motivating than that. And so I got into the Senate race because I thought what we needed was to add a new front to these challenges.
Mm.
We needed to add primary challenges, and the most important primaries to add were Senate primary challenges, specifically in blue states.
What was your logic there? I think I see it, but I want to make sure. So, like, why is it important for blue states to have primary challengers?
Because we're the ones where it, the primary is the election, as we talked about earlier. You know, never take the general for granted. I worked, one of the losing campaigns I was on was the Martha Coakley Scott Brown race. I will never forget what it feels like to be on a campaign that didn't take the Republican challenger seriously enough. I will never do that. But also, we can take the Republican challenger seriously and also acknowledge the reality of, as long as you do that in a state like Massachusetts, you are likely to. Um, as long as you take the Republican challenger seriously, the primary is like, and don't, pull off the gas, you are likely to win the nomination if you win, or win the nomination if you become the Democratic selection. And so the bluer states is where it is most important that we be paying the least attention to this mythical electability, which is not something I really want to be talking about or thinking about anywhere, but I care about it the least in a place like, in this cycle, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, or Delaware. In Delaware, we didn't end up with a challenge. In Rhode Island, we have a challenger right now. His name is Connor Burbridge. He is definitely a long shot, but that primary isn't until mid-September. So go look him up. He's going against a moderate who votes for a shockingly high number of Trump appointees. How? Why? Maybe he doesn't get the news at his house.
Maybe it's for John Fetterman.
I, Fetterman is one of the only Democrats who votes for more Republicans than Jack Reed does. Jack Reed is not a good senator. So check out Connor Burbridge. But back on topic. So I really wanted to, I thought we needed primary challenges, especially in these bluer states. And I thought the Senate was most important because the Senate is where you have the most tools to be fighting back. There are things that you should be doing in the House that we aren't seeing. The House is not innocent in all this, which is part of why I was not swayed by the entrant of a congressman into my race. That didn't change anything. They're also currently in Washington, have been there for the last 12 years. But the Senate does have more that they can and should be doing. And so that is why those races are the ones that I thought were most relevant to this message of, there is more we can be doing and we should be doing it right now. Primaries do two things. Primaries pressure the people who could change tomorrow. Look, I want to support Abdul El Sayed in Michigan. But that's an open seat. Whether he wins or Haley Stevens wins, neither of them are going to impact anything until January of next year. That's 6 months away. Senator Markey can, and I think in a couple of ways, a couple of times, in small ways, I had hoped for more, but hey, in a couple of ways, I think he did change some things because of my campaign.
What did he do?
I think that my campaign had an influence on when he called to abolish ICE.
Okay. Oh, so he is called to abolish ICE?
Yes.
Oh, good job.
Thanks. Yeah, I think there's a direct connection there. Representative Moulton as well. I think that there is a direct connection between my campaign and when the two of them did that. Yeah. you have to put truth, get them both under truth serum to find out how true that is. But uh, I think the timing works.
Yeah.
Um, um, so I think that primary challengers impact the people who can change tomorrow and who can change the levers of power tomorrow. And if they don't, you get to replace them. And so I think the primary challenges are really, really important and are something that we should be actively encouraging. Um,
Mhm.
Even if you plan to then support the incumbent, the idea of a primary challenge is one that I think we should be more open and receptive to. I think they make candidates, elected officials, better.
So I live in Norfolk, Virginia, and right next door to us, that congressional district is Congressional District 2. I was speaking with a couple of the candidates, and they were saying that, it's District 2 is currently held by a Republican, but it is a vulnerable seat. Kind of flips back and forth between Democrats and Republicans. The candidate was talking about probably needing around, I think it was like $50 million for the campaign, or just for the general election, to raise. And that is just one sliver of Virginia. That's not even statewide. So, did you have any idea how much money it was going to cost you in order to have a primary? And B, can we please get money out of politics?
Sure. So what number did they say? You said 50?
I think it was 50.
Okay. So a lot of numbers get thrown around, and the real number changes race to race, cycle to cycle, market to market. The amount that it would cost to run a primary in Albany versus the amount that it would cost to run a primary in Springfield, Massachusetts should be the same, because those are really overlapping media markets. Most of the radio markets treat it the same. A lot of the TV markets treat it the same. Um, but Springfield, Massachusetts is covered by Richie Neal, who is the leading Democrat on Ways and Means. He came into this cycle with $3 or $4 million in the bank, and he brings in a lot each quarter on top of that. He's one of the leading uh, recipients of corporate money in all of Congress. So even though it's basically the same media market, basically the same everything, um, running in Springfield is going to be way more expensive than running in Albany, even though they should be identical. So it's not, every race is going to be different based on who's in it, how many. I didn't know what to expect going in, just because I'm the kind of person who does that kind of research before. But it's real bad. It is really a shame that, to stick with that Springfield example, you cannot drive through that desert. Yeah. Jeremy Leland for Congress. Yard sign. If you go to an event, you will see his booth. His team, it's incredible. I had some computer coders build a really good system at helping me find events. I didn't get her with it. He just did it. Fine. And he's got people at every event you can imagine. He has just this incredible field team. Jeremy and his team are everywhere. And there is such enthusiasm and energy around that campaign. But Richie Neal has 20 times more money than him. Is it enough? And the idea that this district, that this race might be decided
by I don't even know if they've printed Richie Taylor or sometimes just I know what's asking for him. Um, this, this race might be decided by that massive influx of corporate money instead of one of the most impressive grassroots campaigns this cycle that absolutely deserves to be getting national attention, and it is a shame that it isn't. Um, it's one of the most interesting. It is the most interesting. Look, I'm sorry, I haven't finished this thought yet. I'm gonna shit on my fourth attempt. I swear. Um, I spent a year traveling this entire state. I did 235 in-person events.
Dang.
The most interesting story in Massachusetts politics right now is not our Senate race. It is the first congressional district race for Congress, where you have the classic establishment big money figure versus the classic grassroots powered and local energy. All of the indivisibles and local groups are endorsing him. And will it be enough? Can the little guy defeat the big money? It is by far the most interesting thing happening in Massachusetts politics right now. And it absolutely deserves to be getting more attention than it is. And the fact that that's an open question is a statement to how broken our campaign finance system is. So to get back to your question, yes, we have to get money out of politics. We have to get money out of politics. It is perverting so many of our policies. It is perverting so much of our governing structure. It is perverting so many of these problems that we don't even think of as campaign finance problems are campaign finance problems. One of the classic examples that I like to give on the campaign trail is we don't usually think of housing as a campaign finance problem. It's one of the few problems we actually typically think of as like really probably distinct. But no, even that is a campaign finance problem. Several years ago, you had a bipartisan bill that was working its way through Congress to regulate short-term rentals, Airbnb, VRBO, etc. Had Republican and Democratic co-sponsors, but it died in committee the same year that Airbnb increased its political giving tenfold. That just doesn't seem like a coincidence to me.
Yeah.
I don't think it seemed like a coincidence to Airbnb. These companies are buying influence. Another great example is gun policy. Look, it's not just the left that wants universal background checks.
Mhm.
It's not just the left that wants to close the gun show loophole. Look, there are other gun policy regulations that are more controversial, but some of the top level, some of the top level gun rights bills are broadly popular. You know, between 70 and 85% support across the country. Depending on the poll you're looking at and depending on when you're asking, but that's including they're going to have. So why are Republicans ignoring more than half their base? It's because their campaigns need gun and money to continue. It depends on it. The Republican Party needs gun lobby money to function. And they need gun lobby energy as grassroots level volunteers, etc. And that is a reward system than actually appealing to the interests of the majority often, or if not the majority, then a sizable chunk of their voters. money in politics is at the root of so many of the problems that we know how to solve, but aren't making progress on.
Yeah. So part of the challenge with that is that the Supreme Court in 2008 came out with Citizens United, and it equated money with speech.
Yes.
And right now, I think that we are seeing the extreme end, and I mean very quickly, unfortunately, of what happens there. So you were saying that Republicans need the the gun lobbies like money and energy and stuff. The Democratic establishment needs corporate money to fight the Republicans because of how much corporate money that they get. And so it kind of comes into this like just arms race, but a money race where the the only people that are losing are you and me and and everyone in the middle, while the people with the most money get the most power and the most say.
So, yes, asterisk. There, it is really hard to win a primary when your opponent has more money than you. Um, the data is bad. 90% win rate for the candidate with more money, something like that. But a lot of that data is races where it's candidates with 2 million versus candidates with 10,000. There isn't as good data on candidates, or at least I haven't had access and time to play with it on races closer. But we have seen people like James Talrico raise millions and millions of dollars without corporate PAC money. Now, not everyone's going to be able to do that. But we have seen people achieve fundraising success without corporate PAC money. And so I don't know that we have to accept we need corporate PAC money to fight back. But if anyone wants to make that argument, if anyone wants to make we need corporate money to fight back argument, show me that it's good faith. I'm waiting for someone to say, we need corporate PAC money to fight back. And so I am accepting corporate PAC money. But here's all of the times I voted against these corporations who donated to my campaign. It could maybe convince me to overlook it for a candidate, but I haven't seen it yet. We haven't we haven't seen it yet, then maybe that should tell us.
That's the thing, man. Corporations, they tend to like look at not just like giving away money out of the kindness of their hearts. They're thinking about it as an investment. And so if they put money in and then that candidate actually votes against something that's in their interest, they're probably not going to be giving that candidate any more money afterwards.
Well, that's why it seems to me we've identified a problem. Seems to me we've identified a problem. I think that we have seen that there is an appetite for candidates with values, candidates who would say, I am going to pull this line, and I am going to not accept corporate money, and I'm going to work to try and change these systems. And there is an appetite for that. And not all of those candidates are breaking through. Certainly not as many as I would hope, but some of them are. And as much as I wish we could win this fight in a day, I'm not surprised that it's taking a few bites at the apple. and continuing to spread this message and continuing to get people out there pushing this is good, and it is working. And look, there are some sitting elected officials, again, not many, but there are some who took corporate back money earlier in their career and don't anymore. And I think the more we keep pushing on that, the more we'll get people moving in that direction. And I'll accept that. Like, we need allies. We're fighting to win. We're not fighting to win a purity test. We're fighting to make change. If you've been in Congress and you're willing to make some changes and start voting better and start acting better, great. But I don't think, the reality is, I don't think that this is an area where compromise is going to work. But I mean, you hit on a core thing. You hit on the Supreme Court. All of this comes back to the Supreme Court. And as much as I just, advocated for a little bit of leniency with how we look at people and are willing to try to accept new allies, there is no room for Democrats who don't understand the crisis of the court right now. We have to be that straightforward about it. If you cannot get behind expanding the court, you are not worthy of my time, my money, my vote. I will vote for you over a Republican if that is my choice. I am not spending any time or energy donating to you or supporting you.
Mhm.
Nothing is achievable without the court right now.
Yeah.
Our situation with campaign finance is as bad as it is because of Citizens United. Our voting rights system is as bad as it is because of the Calais ruling and the ruling before that they did gutting voting rights. Women's health is getting worse and worse because of Dobbs and the rulings before that. They have said that there are members of the court who have openly said that they are open to reconsidering interracial marriage, that they are open to reconsidering gay marriage. These are extremists who are making decisions not based on law, not based on precedent, not based on history, but based on their own ideological needs. And they will not bat an eye at overturning every single Democratic policy initiative that we pass. And so if we cannot commit to expanding the court, then every policy goal that we pass is not worth the paper we wrote it on.
Mm.
It is expand the court or nothing.
Yeah.
It's that simple.
I 1000% agree. And I will yes and you and go one step further with a lot of the gun issues right now is going back to 2008 DC v. Heller, which is the first time that the Supreme Court held that the Second Amendment gave an individual the right to bear arms. Prior to that, court precedent was very freaking clear because that for a well-regulated militia part, they routinely upheld gun control laws. It's not until Johnny Reb and the Funky Bunch came in and was like, hey, let's just reinterpret everything here.
Yeah. And I mean, again, because I can't think of anything during this conversation, really sure. Okay. The ruling that now we need to have some weird historical precedent. If we're going to regulate an assault weapon, we need to find some contingency from 1720 that they were regulating assault weapons in villages, and It's absolute nonsense. And they make it up as they go. They're just, if a candidate can't see that, they're telling you that they're not reading the room. They're telling you that they don't understand the terrain that of legislation. They're telling you that they don't understand what's needed to pass legislation that will survive. How can you write legislation that will be effective if you don't understand that the court is likely to invalidate it? We just had 4 members of the court look at the 14th Amendment and say, nah. I mean,
They're like original, like textualists or whatever. Like, it makes no sense.
and so, please, I make one ask to everyone listening to this. Do not vote for anyone who will not expand the court. Do not donate to anyone who will not expand the court.
Yeah.
Don't do it.
Yeah, I 100% concur with that. That is that is an act out suggestion there. Do not support any candidate that will not increase the number of justices on the court. It's a constitutional crisis that we're at right now, and the only way to set it all, or to set it, make it right, is by expanding the court.
Exactly. It's not. It's just. It's the only way. To refute some of the arguments that sometimes people make. So sometimes people say, like, well, what if they retaliate? So first of all, I don't know what's going to happen in 2033 or in 2037. I know what's happening right now. And right now, we have 6 extremists who have shown us with their actions that they will rule against their own decisions from 3 years ago because of the presidency change. The situation we are in right now needs to be addressed, and fear that something might change a little bit down the line 5, 7 years from now is not a good reason to hamstring ourselves today when we know we are in a crisis right now. That's the first thing. The second thing is we can reform the court in a all-expansive way that tries to minimize the likelihood that that tries to minimize the likelihood of retaliation. We're not just planning on expanding the court. We're also planning on incorporating term limits. We're also planning on incorporating a fixed appointment schedule. And when we're also planning on incorporating a enforceable code of ethics. And when you tie all of these court reforms together, you make it much harder to say this is a politically motivated response. You make it much clearer that this is a reaction to a lawless, out of control court that is going on vacations with billionaires. It's much easier to say that this is a reaction to an out of control body. And also, you make it politically harder for retaliation in the future. And the last point is, by going to 13 judges specifically, you also make it harder to expand in the future, because there is historical precedent for tying the number of judges to the number of districts. And so if we go to 13 and tie the judges back to the districts, then again, we've added another obstacle to future expansion, because we haven't just pulled a number out of a hat. We have said, here's a number, here's why there's a number, here's how we're done. So we can do this in a way where, yes, we are also achieving political aims, but we are protecting and legitimizing the body of the court in the process.
I do agree with you. Clarence Thomas is the best justice money can buy.
Expensive though, actually. I don't know. I feel like Alito seems to be much cheaper.
Alex, man, I have had so much fun this conversation. I could talk to you for hours, dude.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate it. It's been great talking to you. I'm kind of jealous of your background. Did you paint that, or is that like sheet? What is that?
So actually, our former neighbor, we used to live in an apartment, and across the hall, our neighbor was like it just graduated from ODU, Old Dominion, and she is a nuclear engineer and a really badass artist too. It's like I don't know, the way that her brains work is just crazy to me. But like she she painted this for us, like it's probably 11 by 7 feet, something like that,
Cool.
and painted all of it for us, like in a weekend. Man, it was so cool.
I like it. Yeah, it's nice.
So where can folks find you if they want to find out more
Yeah.
about Alex?
Yeah, sure. So, Blue Sky. I always call it Blue Ski in my head. Blue Sky at Rikleen, whatever. And Instagram at Rikleen Alex. And since my campaign has ended, I have a regular newsletter now, writing about the court, writing about Massachusetts politics, writing about sort of whatever suits my fancy. And the part that matters, I link to it often. Subscribe, become a paid subscriber to support the work if you can. But either way, just subscribe to get those in your inbox roughly once or twice a week. Alex, you can find those on my socials on my website anyway.
And if you don't mind, send me a link, and what we can do is put the link in the show notes, and that way people can just like look, just kind of look down and click on it, make it as easy as possible for them.
Awesome, yeah, easy.
Yeah. Well, Alex, man, I appreciate it, bud. Thanks for acting out with me.
Of course, thanks for having me. It was great.